It's like a surprise. Like, you don't know. It's really like a surprise. It's like looking. Hi, beautiful.
And then I was like, the elevator didn't have the buttons on. I'm like, is it cool?
Hey guys, what's up? It's your girl, and we are back with another episode of The Invisible Thread. We have a very special guest in the building today, Jazmin Burrell, Director of Strategy at Obsidianworks.
Yes,
hey girl.
Yes, ma'am. Hey girl.
How's it going?
It's going good. It's Juneteenth weekend. Things are shaping up.
Exactly. I'm so excited to be out.
It's beautiful.
So let's just start from the top about how you really made your path in strategy, and how did you even know that strategy was a career field that you wanted to be in and get interested in even further?
You know, that's a great question, because I feel like strategy is kind of like an elusive, practice, because advertising kind of is at that level. But I went to the University of Missouri for undergrad from the esteemed School of Journalism there, and studied strategic communication, which is a fancy word for advertising. But I studied account management. But being that strategy is a fairly new field, we didn't really have a strategy department yet. So the stuff that I was doing in account was strategy, but we didn't know any better. So I was really doing strategy work, but it was being called account work at that time. But when I had graduated and I started interning, I went to Dallas, I went to Atlanta before I got my first full-time job in New York. I actually had no intention to move to New York whatsoever. It was never on my list of places to go, but mostly just because I imagine New York to be very big in the sense of for work, in the sense of advertising. So I always imagine the big BBDOs and the big DDBs. So I knew I wanted to start off really, really small. So I got really lucky, and I actually got an offer at Spike DDB, which is Spike Lee's creative agency, for that to be my first role, and we were super small. It was maybe 12 of us on a good day if everybody came into the office. And so I was an assistant account executive at that time and learned so much. And so I was able to work with our strategy department there and really kind of understand the ins and outs better, because once you see it in real world and, in its full, regalia and experience, you kind of understand the way the pieces work together a little bit more. And one thing I loved about account at that time was it was really like the nucleus, because you kind of did get a chance to touch and see everybody. And but with that being said, since we were a small agency, I basically did a lot of cross-functional stuff, and I had to put my hands in a lot of different pots. But I realized that strategy is definitely where I wanted to net out. I was client-facing from the beginning of my career, so I knew I liked different aspects. But being that I did stay in small spaces, it made it kind of easy to craft that journey for me, for my roles to be exactly what I wanted them to be. So I was a client-facing strategist basically from jump, and have been able to really make that into my roles leading up to now.
So there's a lot there. So I'm still a part of MAPE, the Multicultural Advertising Intern Program, and Ad Color. And being in those environments, you meet a lot of junior level strats, or even just people outside of strategy who want to get into strategy. And what you said about starting in account management and being able to be a part of strategy at your agency, that's a gem, because a lot of agencies are structured in the way where if you're in account management, you really are in account management, and they kind of work in silos. Not all agencies, but some. And I hear those stories a lot about people being in account or media, but wanting to be more a part of the creative process, or into strategic thinking. So how do you think that someone in those roles in media or account can kind of step into strategy a little bit more, especially when their agency's structured in silos, or just get more experience within it?
That's a great question. And I think even before, obviously if you were in those situations, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But something I tell people all the time, when you are first getting started in advertising, you cannot chase a name. Everybody wants to work at certain big companies and certain big agencies because of reputation. That'll carry you really far. And to an extent it will, but agency reputations change all the time. And being in a small space, especially with people that look like you, and it really is a specialized environment, you really kind of do get an opportunity that you wouldn't be able to get in some of those larger agencies that are really structured and siloed. But when you do find yourself in that position, I think that one thing that you kind of have to do at this point is really actually expand out and try to start doing strategy stuff on your own. At the end of the day, on the internet, there are 1 billion and 10 briefs online for you to play with and try to learn, and reaching out to, thankfully, there's so many mid-level, junior, and like director level strategists at this point, like reaching out to some of us and like, just getting like our eyes on it. And like my current senior strategist, who also did a few of those programs too, but she had just reached out to me. She was like, hey, Jazz, like, she went to Mizzou. She's like, hey, I really just want to like, get in. I just want to understand. I just want to get a part of it. And I was able to help her do that. You really just have to really reach out to the network that exists, but also you do kind of have to take initiative to really learn what it is, because something that is interesting to me about strategy is that with it being so new, a lot of companies and agencies and people alike kind of mix up what it means to be a strategist, because there are so many different titles that include strategists. So a brand strategist and a social strategist are not the same thing. A content strategist is not the same thing. Like, so really understanding where it is that you want to fit in, and understanding what you really want to get from it. And like, if you want to be multifaceted, if you want to have a certain discipline, because I think that people kind of go in liking that word strategy, liking that word strategist, because it feels like it's like a powerful situation, and it is, but it's like at the same time, you really have to get a better understanding of it, because it's not easy. And I know a lot of people think they can, everybody like, oh, I can do strategy, I get it. It's like everybody can if you can do it, but you can't always. So the game is a game sometimes.
The girls that get it, get it.
The girls that get it, get it.
I think what you said about not just going after the big names, like in that context, you were talking about agencies, but also like you said brands as well, but especially with brands, because everyone wants to work on Nike and everybody wants to work on Adidas, et cetera. And I always say, I'm so thankful that I started my career at Ogilvy on IBM. And at the time I got clowned. Like people were like, IBM is like it's not sexy. It's not Google. It's not, you know what I mean? But I was so thankful that I spent 2 years on that account, because IBM at that time, it's so complex.
Yes.
But going back to like not going after the sexy name or the big brand, being a part of brands that actually have problems to solve.
Talk about it.
And brands that don't have the big cultural phenomenon or everybody talking about them on the complexes and the hype beasts of the world, like that was IBM. And so my advice to strategists is always go where the names aren't, like go where it's dirty and muddy and where you actually have to like figure out how to make a deck and a brief and an approach to solve a real problem versus just like gain clout, And
very similar with agencies, like starting off, Spike DDB sounds like, it's a flashy name, but we were very, very, very small. It was very nifty. We did not have deck designers. We did not have proofreaders. We did not have a full team to go through all the motions. We weren't even having all the finance people that we needed at the time. So we were basically doing legal stuff. So it's like, just imagining it beyond that, and the names will always come. They will always come. And like something I always tell people too is like, don't get stuck on a certain emphasis either. People are like, oh, I want to work in sports, or I want to work in tech, or I want to work on beauty, or I want to work on fashion. You should work on all of it, because all of it intersects, especially when we get more into the world of like brand partnerships and branded content. All of that stuff matters. I've worked on auto, I've worked on spirits, I've worked on tech, I've worked in CPG. Like I've done all kinds of stuff, and all that stuff it all levels up, because all these things, all these worlds intersect. So if you just say like, oh, I only want to work on sports, I only want to work on Nike, it's not gonna fare out.
And then that's just your only world. Like how do you get inspired?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? If you're only looking at like what sports teams are doing, or like what fashion, like some of my best insights or like strategic approaches have came from just being inspired. Like if I was in tech, by the beauty industry, like something that I just saw on social or TikTok that like could apply to what we're doing over here, So I hear you completely.
And they all intersect. Like being like, before I was at Obsidian, I was at Snapchat and like doing all the stuff like on Snap with like tech and AR. All that stuff leans into the beauty space. It's just, there's no other way around it. Like even when you think about like being like, black people or brown people, and the way like the lights, like, hit us on the cameras, or the way that they change our features, like all of that stuff. And like the way that has like long-term impacts, like that stuff, you cannot be within one world and not have a link to another. It doesn't matter which one it is. Working in spirits are getting partnerships with everybody across the group. Everybody's gonna be 21 at some point. So imagining what that looks like, they all cross over.
I agree. So moving into your work with Obsidianworks, you were the first person ever brought in to create the strategy department and shape that up and what it looks like. So before we even get into the work, which I'm so excited about, can you just talk about that experience of building a strategy department from scratch and like what that looks like?
I mean, look, like Obsidianworks has been like, we just had our 2-year anniversary, like at the beginning of the month. So it has definitely been a roller coaster of a ride, and it has been a fun one. And one thing that I think that I love the most was like, getting the opportunity from like Chad and Renee and Bobby to really lead up, in the department and be able to get it to where it is today. And it wasn't as tough as I thought it would be because I had people that trusted me to be able to do it. And I think that one thing is really unique about Obsidian is like really our vision is to always like, bring people in that may not have had the opportunities somewhere else or might not have had the credits somewhere else. And that's just across the board. And being able to trust, that person to be able to make the right decisions and build the team up and that expertise because we bring people in for a reason. So, so for me, I was really lucky to, again, going back to our last point though, be able to do so many different things and working at Snapchat and working at 72 and Sunny and working at Spike DDB and working at BET. I was able to pick up so many bits and pieces. So I really had the opportunity to be able to pull some of the best things that I liked from my experiences to be able to build it up. And something that's really unique about Obsidian too is that being that we do lean into that philosophy of giving people opportunities, it's really more with creative than anything else. We really don't have a lot of traditional creatives. So the way that we would think, like, a creative can like respond to a brief is very different. We're dealing with people that have not been in an agency environment before. So being able to pivot and having to pivot to make sure that we get the work to where it needs to be, but also still meet those bottom lines of the client. It was definitely a process, but again, it wasn't too bad because I was able to have leadership that trusted me to do it.
So knowing that you guys have like a non-traditional approach to the way you build your creative team, how do you think that has it changed or molded the way that you lead strategy with creative and your relationship with creative and like
definitely. Like I think that there are things that you kind of expect creatives to know when you're used to doing things like with a creative brief. They're just things you're like, okay, you should know what a mandatory is really supposed to look like or how it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to look in the deck or in the proposal or how to write up and sell through an idea. But with that being said, the team, there is no egos at Obsidianworks. So like, thankfully, I was able to come in. I'm like, okay, y'all, look, I get what we was trying to do, but we're gonna have to reel it back in and then we got to put it back out. But like our relationship is very strong across the board and they really have deemed us to be a very trustworthy team. And like something I told my team when we first like started, I was like, our goal is for us to be the most trusted department within this agency period. So I want everybody to be able to come to us and ask us a question. They know, regardless of what answer they get, that this is coming from a place for it to make the work better. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. It's to make the work better and to get you better and to get us where we need to be as an agency. So knowing that has been instilled in like the way that our team looks at us and views our feedback and views our conversations has made our like relationships much better. And then also once they get that stuff down pat, you kind of revert back to the other ways and the kind of more traditional ways. So as people look for their careers beyond Obsidian, they don't have like a smaller team that is a little bit more flexible with the way they do briefs. You can know how to actually still do that. And another thing that we wanted to make sure that we did at Obsidian was knowing that the 5 C's were very new to this team. We had like we have a weekly newsletter called Strat Chat. So it's like where we have each of the C's and we just show you how that actually applies in the real world. So what's going on in culture, what's going on in connections, category, consumer. So you can kind of see when you get these briefs, this is where this stuff is coming from. Like it might not be specific to a client right now, but when we log off and you interact with the world, you can maybe get to think like a strategist a little bit and you can get a little bit of inspiration to start the week. So
when you were just saying like what it's supposed to look like a creative is supposed to know how to do this, like the supposed world, I like love this conversation because, internal meetings, as I'm sure can, especially at traditional agencies, can be so crazy before you get to a client call because like the story's there, the creative's there, but there's this like whole mindset of what it's supposed to look like and the way we're supposed to roll out like the strategy and when the insight's supposed to come in and their creative, narrative, when the manifesto comes in, if there needs to be a manifesto, like all of these strategic like frameworks and creative just approaches to presentation can sometimes make it even more confusing to the client where the client's like, yo, can you just like, first of all, bring me in on the process a little bit sooner so I can see how this is shaping up. But also I don't need this big, sexy, beautifully designed. Sometimes they just want to understand like what the point is.
What are you selling? Like, what are you selling me?
Exactly. And you don't always need the supposed tos, like how creative is supposed to look or like roll out, you know? So I hear that completely.
Yeah, and it's like knowing that, like to that point, the fact that like there is a traditional method and a traditional way, it's particularly at other agencies. I think that's one thing about at Obsidian that the clients really like about us. It's very personable. Like, you know, like the slide might have a little bit of words on it, but we're not gonna read from a slide. But just so you know, in case you send it out, you got the words on the slide, but it might not have a manifesto. The manifesto might not lead into anything like super grandiose, but you get it, and we have this opportunity to have these conversations with you. And it also makes the creatives feel more confident about the work, which is really the key to selling anything at an agency. Like the presentation and what you presenting work that you believe in is going to be the cornerstone to any successful campaign. Because if you believe in it, you can make somebody else believe in it, and it can be a team to help other people believe in it. So
I love
super
that.
important
Conversation, because what you're saying now sounds like a dialogue versus a monologue. And usually agency presentations are just like a straight through, you
Absolutely.
know?
Like we just had a client presentation a couple days ago, and I was like, look, I'm about to sit here. I'm not about to stand up and like, you know, point at y'all and do all of this stuff like public speaking. So I'm going to sit here. We're in this open room, and I want y'all to talk to me. So as I'm talking, cut me off. Like, you know, bring anything. Like this is an open dialogue. This is a presentation with a lot of work. We got a lot of stats. If you got any questions, I'm ready to answer them. But I want you to know that this is a partnership. And I think that that's also oftentimes underplayed when it comes to how agencies work with clients.
Couldn't agree more. So moving into the creative work, you were a part of leading the strategy for Creed 3's marketing rollout. And so can we kind of just start from the beginning of all of it with the brand and the ask that came into you and your team?
Yes, so, you know, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but Obsidianworks was co-founded by Michael B. Jordan and Chad Easterling, who is an alumni of Nike. And so we got this opportunity because obviously Michael B. Jordan, it was his directorial debut and the third installment of the Creed series. So this opportunity came to us from Hennessy, who was a major investor in the film. So we were not just like the only like, you know, agency working with them. We're not the only like project that they did, but they wanted to make sure they tapped into us, being that we are obviously tapped in with Michael B. Jordan and his work. And they really wanted to honestly find a way to give back and really embody that never stop, never settle mentality that they have across the brand. And we were really excited to do it because, like I said, I've worked on spirits before, so I kind of understand, you know, the idea of luxury and aspiration. And obviously, I see how that coincides with the work that, you know, Mike had done with the film. So we were really excited to do it. But they wanted it to be like a content series that felt really like ownable to help lead to the rollout of the film.
Yeah. Okay. And this was all branching from Never Stop, Never Settle.
So yes. So Never Stop, Never Settle is the creed or the mantra of Hennessy. So it's like a little bit like of an organization that they have where they tap into like influencers and like, you know, like entrepreneurs and all sorts of stuff like that. So like people that actually embody this idea of like, you know, being like a hustler and like, you know, kind of leaning into the worlds of art and like music and different like just tastemaker areas and just people that really lean into those, particularly Black.
Yeah, and I think that's exciting as a strategist, right? Because they already did the work, you know, like Never Stop, Never Settle. How many years has this been going on with Hennessy?
I think Never Stop, Never Settle Society has been going on for maybe like 5+ years.
Okay.
So it's been around. It definitely is an established program to an extent.
Yes. Okay. And so the challenge then is taking Never Stop, Never Settle, that platform, and translating it into another area of culture, which was the movie Creed.
Yes. So like, they were really excited about Creed because if anyone is like, you know, familiar with the series, it's obviously about Adonis Creed building his legacy on his own, but there also is that dichotomy of Michael B. Jordan is building his legacy with this film series because the fact that Creed is such a unique, you know, like film series is because it's branching off of Rocky. Rocky is one of the most iconic anthologies in the history of cinema, period. So the fact that Creed has been able to create its own path and build its own legacy is impressive beyond words. And the fact that this was also obviously Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, it just was so many synergies. But they didn't really know how to make it come to life per se. And they wanted to really work with an agency that got both sides of the coin and be able to make it have something feel like it has a little bit more legs to it and has a little bit more body to it.
Yeah. So where did you start?
So, girl, I started, and I want to say this was like maybe like my first 2 months at the agency. And so I think, coming in, like being like the new, person on the team just in general, and like, being new to the process and new to like the people that we were working with, I came in hot. I was like, y'all, we got to make sure that like these decks are where they need to be, because the first briefing I did a full briefing like in a regular 5 seats format. Everybody was very excited. The work came back. We was like, okay, no, this is not where we needed to net out. We're kind of missing the ask. We're missing some of like, like the things that we need to do to get to where we need to be. But with that being said, I made sure that I took a very collaborative approach with this. So like I had no issue, like, sit and think about the way that people need to write, the way they need to actually talk about the ideas to bring some of the strategic points through. But so that was when we got there, and I said, well, yeah, the reason why the work isn't there because we haven't seen the movie. So I said, well, let me go back to the beginning and let me actually try to see what we can do and if we can find any synergies from like actual things from the film, because it's going to be hard for them to say like, oh, this is how this relates to Hennessy, or this is how it relates to Creed 3 when we haven't seen one of those things come to life. So we wanted to make sure that we pulled out key themes. So some of those things were like Black fatherhood, or like, signing ASL in Black, because in the film, the daughter actually is, deaf. So being able to see how that looks, with Black families. Thinking about the idea of having like a villain that is relatable. Jonathan Major's character was like, was in jail wrongfully for a while, like, taking the bid for Adonis Creed. So, how do I actually, I'm still rooting for him. There's going to be people rooting for him. So thinking about those tension points to really help us get to a creative spot, but always maintaining to make sure that we think about that idea of legacy at its core and how that can actually look and shape up.
So you pulled those core themes from the movie. Yeah. You had the core of legacy from the brand and Hennessy. And then so the ask was creative team. What does a content series look like from this?
Yes. So let's get it. We had a little bit of flexibility. Okay. So it wasn't just content. We knew whatever that we did, we wanted there to be content involved. So whatever we did, we wanted there to be content. So there were all kind of different ideas thrown around, from like a summit to like more like of a creator house, but it would end up being content to lead into the rollout.
Okay, cool. So what was the work that ultimately came from that strategic upfront and narrative?
Yeah, so it ended up going through a billion different names, but the original name was We're the Blueprint. And it really wanted to lean into the idea of the fact that this is Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, and less than 5% of people behind the cameras in movies, period, are Black. So being able to shine a spotlight on Black creators, Black people, Black producers, Black directors behind the scene, and get them an opportunity to have films funded. And something that we also wanted to make sure that we brought to life with this was we wanted to actually have them spotlight people that are actually making change in communities. So we had 5 directors, we had 5 change makers, and so we had them actually make these spots, highlighting their stories in their neighborhoods, about their initiatives. And then we paid for all of that, and then we submitted them to movie awards so they can get a little bit more, legs and consideration across the board and help them get some accolades.
Some people want to work with certain directors. I want to be around the clothing. I want to see how it's made. I like to talk to people to see what their inspiration comes from. I'm the person who reads the scripts, and I have to learn them inside out and know all the details. By telling my story, I want to be able to inspire other people who look like me. My name's Gina Bowen. I am a costume supervisor for film and television. I remember I was working on this show, and there'd be about 100 of us, most of them white men. There were 2 Black people, 4 women, and that's the environment that you're working in. There weren't a lot of people who look like me. However, I'm not going to limit what I want to do just because I'm the only one there. I'm not going to give anyone else agency over my career. I always say that this is bigger than me. Like, yes, I want to make my daughter proud and inspire her, but I also do it for my community, for other young women from Boston, Massachusetts. I had to throw that in there. But that just inspires me to never stop and never settle. I always say I get my creativity from my mom. She sews, she made jewelry, she made a lot of our clothes. I get that from her. Also, my love of music. I was inspired by my mom, but also my grandmother. She was a Black woman that achieved a lot to be born when she was born. She wasn't rich, but she lived a great life, and I was just amazed by that. There were always pictures around her home of our relatives. We had roots in the South, and some of our family had been enslaved. And when you see those photographs, though, you're like, how are they able to get from there to where they are now, where you're seeing them on vacation, you're seeing them riding horses, you're seeing them dressed in their Sunday best? That kind of makes me feel like if they've achieved that, then I have to keep building.
Never stop, never settle, to me is just a mindset, right? To always shoot for the stars. Wake up and give it your all every day. And that's just kind of what I've always done and I've always tried to do. Opening this first supervision store flagship on Slauson means a lot because, I grew up in the area. My grandfather and his brothers own businesses in the area. Again, it's a mindset that returning to the community or just reinvesting back in the community means more than just a business move. The word supervision means, to have big ideas and be very creative, but also to supervise and create with a sense of responsibility for what you put out into the world. I think my team is a perfect reflection of that, right? The biggest thing that we have working in our favor is our chemistry. Honestly, I feel like I have the dream team. Everybody on my team is like super powerful and creative and committed to their work. I think this mindset, was ingrained in me as a young kid. Now at this age, I look back and I'm like, I can do the things that I do today because of my family. Legacy to me means being an example, not just for my family or my kids, but also for the younger version of myself or the next generation that comes after me. You have that mindset to never stop, never settle. It's limitless, right? It's whatever we want it to be.
Have to get your hands dirty. All right, I'm ready to go now. You good? All right. Sometimes I sit back and reflect on my love for the fine arts. Seeing someone start with a blank canvas and turn it into something beautiful never gets old to me. And when I think about what I'm building with Obsidianworks, the legacy I want to leave behind is one of purpose, grace, and joy. I see Obsidianworks as a family, a community, a village. But the truth is, you're not always going to have all the answers. That's a key component to legacy. You must be willing to put the work in and be dedicated to molding and shaping something to its full potential. Have to get your hands dirty. You have to be patient. Be patient. Be patient. You have to be persistent. Never stop, never settle is a mindset. To always be evolving, growing. Never give up on what you believe in. And being challenged and pushed beyond your comfort zone is exactly where the metamorphosis lives. knowing that my intentions and actions will ripple well beyond me, I want to make sure that I'm setting people up to feel inspired. Because sometimes where you're going doesn't exist yet. It's in your hands. Sometimes it's in your hands waiting for you to create it.
My name is Diana Ali Chaya, and I'm a film director. I studied fine art at school, and so I was making art for a really long time, sort of performance and weird video art. And then I kind of fell into filmmaking because I wanted to focus more on like a Black female narrative, and I felt like I couldn't really do that in the art world. I fell into film by accident, and then, yeah, that's what I do now. Felt like growing up, I never really saw people that looked like me on TV. Having Black characters in front of a camera and it not being in kind of a nuanced way, very deliberate. I think, our protagonist, Gina, is someone that has been in the industry for a really long time and has persevered and is super successful, and, the film really embodies her never stop, never settle mentality.
My name is Walter Thompson Hernandez. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm a writer-director. I think my pathway to filmmaking kind of starts with growing up in Los Angeles, being inspired by the people around me, and kind of thinking about like films as forms of escape. I think now a lot of my projects and films kind of revolve around people and communities, folks who kind of look like me often and share a similar story. We're spending time with Gavin today, and he's somebody who's like a true representative of LA in so many different ways, and I think somebody who really encompasses and embodies what we're trying to do here with the never stop, never settle sort of mentality. We're spending a whole day with him, spending time with his family and his line of work, and kind of asking questions about motivations and inspiration. I think Gavin embodies never stop, never settle, and I think he's somebody who at every different point in his life made a choice to keep going and to not stop. And I think he's somebody, if you look at his sort of trajectory and arc, we can find a lot of inspiration, right? Like he's made these choices to involve his community and his friends and his family in what he does, and I think it's really inspiring.
My name is Tevin Tavares. I am a director and screenwriter. I think the main thing that I'm trying to achieve through my storytelling is just to inspire the audience and inspire those viewers out there and make them change their perspective on life. I think that this film embodies the never stop, never settle mantra because it's something that is completely different. I think it's something that you wouldn't expect from Chad. Chad is a former athlete, he's 6'6", but the way that we captured art and the way that we had elegance and the way that we shot things, it's almost poetic in a way. And I think that's the biggest thing is we didn't settle on just, taking him and looking at him like an athlete, but we looked at him more from an artist perspective.
What I loved about the piece was that it really highlights the key in advertising, which is not just making ads, but making action.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to tell a beautiful story about like legacy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that what's cool, what you guys did with Hennessy, it was like actually funding those films and actually giving them legs to their career that was outside of this campaign that had nothing to do with just like the brand itself. And I think oftentimes brands miss that. Like we tell a beautiful story that like makes people cry and it's targeted towards a specific community, but it's actually not doing anything for it.
Exactly.
And that's also what I meant about like Hennessy having already done the work with Never Stop, Never Settle and that society and that fund. And as a strategist, it's so fun to be able to like take something that already exists, but then be like, okay, it exists in this world, but now what we've been doing, like, what does that look like over here and over here and in beauty and, you know, and so the work came together so beautifully and it was so well done.
Thank you. And that's one thing that we really, really harp in on at Obsidianworks is that almost everything needs to be like laden in purpose. Like our Chief Impact Officer, Renee Spellman, like everything that we touch, it needs to have some level of impact to it. Like, you know, obviously we can do like fun stuff, but we want to make sure there's a community element to it because the same way like we want to give back to people that we hire and have them be able to have opportunities to be able to like touch on businesses and brands and campaigns they normally wouldn't have. We want to make sure that the brands that we work with also take that responsibility and like reach back to the communities that they want to target.
Got you. And was there any other creative extension outside of the film itself for the overall campaign?
So the Creed 3 campaign was huge. So we actually, like, the films were so well received that during the Hennessy like release party, they were actually played like in succession in like a little room where they actually spotlighted all of like the change makers and what they did, and they would have links out, like, you know, their stories and like things they do in the community. And there was like an experiential event like with an open bar and like a boxing ring and all kinds of good stuff. So. And obviously it lives on social, so it was able to get like a lot of legs, and there was a lot of like, you know, public reception on social media about how amazing and like you know, fully thought out and like 360 that the campaign was for the movie. So it was really, really exciting to be a part of that.
Throughout this entire thing, you've been laying gems for people to take away for their own careers. But we call this section Perfecting Strategy.
Okay.
And so what are a few gems or like tidbits that you would give other strategists to really take away within their own careers based upon the work you've kind of led with Obsidianworks and the Creed rollout?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would always say is that you have to, even if the answer seems clear, dig a little bit deeper because it can get a lot clearer. Because, for example, when we think about like Creed 3 and when we think about like, you know, Hennessy, it is very clear the through line was legacy. But what does that mean? We could have made legacy be about anything. It could have been about the film. It could have been about, you know, the production. It could have been about the soundtrack. It could have been about anything. But like really thinking about what exactly that could mean for, again, from like a community aspect and from a community impact perspective is like really, really important. So I think a lot of times it feels like things are just laid out. But like we mentioned, like so much stuff is happening in succession. So many things are happening at the same time that like one little nugget can make your strategy go from like, you know, yeah, sure, that's true, to no, this is really, really good. And this is really, really inspiring. So don't just think, okay, that's done. Like, you know, it's on the paper, but really think about it a little bit harder. I think another thing I would say is to always remember as a strategist, your role is to make meaning. And that is true for every facet of the phrase. So making meaning for the briefs that we put out, making meanings for for our clients and for the way that they show up in the world, making meaning for our agency and for the way that we actually like, you know, think about and approach the work in the way that you actually look at like and read and like, you know, do your research and conduct research. That should always be the underlying goal. Because I think that too often it's easy in strategy to get caught up in like the copywriting element of something like a provocation or an underpinning, just feeling like it sounds almost creative. But sometimes it just needs to be simple. And sometimes it just needs to be meaningful to get somebody to where they need to be and to get the work where it needs to be.
Yeah, agree.
So I think those are probably two that I can think of at the top of my head.
Great.
But
those
I think those are like
gems.
things that like really that have helped me throughout my career really understand and ground my work and ground my perspective for what I want to put forward.
How do you keep evolving as a strategist?
You got to keep reading. You got to keep reading. You got to keep experiencing. You have to be outside. Like I think that when strategy first became a principle, like, you know, like a discipline. I said a principle. Lord have mercy. But when it first became a discipline, it was very much the idea, like, you know, kind of like, you know, the nerd. You know, like it's kind of just back there, like, you know, turning out briefs. Like, you know, it is what it is. And I'm like, strategists, we be outside. We be outside with our creators. We be outside with the account people. But you really have to be, because you really do get a chance to like explore and, you know, really understand what exactly is going on and what you're talking about. Because as much as it is like for insight, it's coming from instinct too. And if you do not, you know, really put yourself in positions to where you can be exposed to more, doesn't mean you need to be an extrovert, doesn't mean you need to like, you know, be in everybody's face all the time, but you have to be in a place where you are willing to be exposed to different things and be exposed to different like ways of thinking. Obviously if it's harmful, not, but just thinking about the way that culture evolves. And I think that it's oftentimes really easy to think that being on the internet is enough. Like, I'm on Twitter all the time, or I'm on Instagram all the time. And I'm like, sure, to an extent, but that is very much the way that people communicate online, the way people view things, the way people live online versus the way they would live in real life are really, really different.
And something you just said is something that I think of often, like when you were saying sometimes it's based on instinct versus like insights, and I know that can be the same thing as well, but if we're separating the two as far as instinct, your lived experience and insight, let's say it's like a stat you found or something and you're able to turn that into a cool story for a client. How do you communicate instinct to a client? Because oftentimes I've found within my own career, especially when you're working internally to even get to that client meeting, it's like, okay, that's how you feel, but like, where's the numbers? Like, where's the stat? Like, why would anyone else believe it, So how do you communicate that part of strategy?
So that's a really, really good question. And I think a lot of it has to do with storytelling. A lot of it has to be based in, it's my lived experience, but this is X, Y, Z. And also there's going to be support for it. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example. We had a client reach out to us and they were trying to do a store in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. And they wanted to like get like more like of a black and brown, like, audience or whatever. And they were like, okay, so I think in the school we're going to do Hair Stowe, which is a HBCU that is in St. Louis, in SLU. And it is a Jesuit university, but it's right near this school, right near where this place was going to be. And I said, just because it's right next to SLU does not mean this community is going to SLU. The majority of like black and brown people in St. Louis, they go to Hair Stowe, or they'll go to UMSL, or they'll go to Mizzou because that's what they can afford to go to. But it's stuff like that. Like, so sure, if you're looking at a map, you can see the store will be next to SLU, so that just makes sense. But at the end of the day, those aren't the people that are going to be shopping at this store that you need to talk to. So like I was able to like tell that story, bring that through line, but also just show them the numbers. There's no black people at the school, so this isn't who you need to talk to. So like even with an instinct, and it's instinctual because we know it, but we also know it because beyond just us, we know there is something to support it out there. So, but you'd be shocked at what a storytelling, like really basing it in a personal experience can do, because even if you tell the story strong enough and you don't have the ability to pull the numbers, if it gives enough to it, then they'll be like, okay, well, we'll go get the numbers and we'll figure it out and we'll figure out how to make it work.
And when it comes to storytelling and figuring out how to tell a good story, even when it's not attached to numbers, I get that question a lot as well. It's like, well, how do you strengthen your ability to storytell? And my thing is always just like practice writing. Honestly, that's what helps me. Like, get whatever in your mind out on a paper, whether that's journaling, for me it's poetry, but then not only taking what's in your mind and putting it on a paper, but then seeing like the reaction of someone else when you say it. And like slam has done that for me, you know what I mean? Like slamming and seeing other people's reactions to the words that I put out and like how I make them feel. But do you have any like tidbits around that, just as far as like getting stronger within writing or even just like communication as a whole?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question too. I think when it comes to writing, and this is probably going to sound very, very cliche, but I mean it. I think that as we've evolved communications, like being like a little bit more digital, like being a little bit more on Slack and Teams, we are losing the art of an email. You would be shocked at what a very well-written email can get across. So I think that a lot of times people think about telling a story, think it has to be in a deck, or it has to be like, you're in a meeting and like, you have to see like these reactions live. A good email that really is just like where you can really sit and think about everything that you want to say and reread it and craft it before you send it helps so much. And I really think that once you really perfect that and take time in learning how to communicate what you want to say over that ancient art, it makes stuff a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because I think people really use emails like, I got to keep receipts, or this like, for tracking, or like a quick little like, exchange of information. Being able to sell something through an email is the first step to being able to sell something through anywhere else. Because I think it's too easy, like you mentioned earlier, to think like, this has to be a beautiful deck and we have 5 words on this slide and 6 words on this slide. But being able to break up those chunks, because it's almost like an essay, what we were doing in school. Like, like it's really that same type of format. So thinking about how that looks and thinking about the way that you talk about stuff and like the words you want to use and the points you want to get across over email easily translates when you try to talk about it and when you try to bring stuff up to folks. And that's for me personally. And also one thing for me, I don't code switch this way I talk at work, this way I talk at client meetings. And I think that it's often understated how code switching really impacts your ability to do good work. Because when you are constantly in the back of your mind thinking about how you are being presented or how you are, talking or what you're saying and who you're talking to, it makes it harder for you to naturally flow with your thoughts and your points of view. And even if people are masters at it, I think they are masters at it, you can't be a master and not being yourself. So really being able to get comfortable in the way that you speak and the way that you naturally tell stories, the way you naturally talk to your friends or your family and bringing that into a workplace environment, but making sure you hit those key points is also a really critical way to help bring that through. Because clients are people. I say people that all the time. I think it's too often to think about clients being these are these elusive figures in the background and you got to impress them and get money and get buy-in. These are regular people. They don't, they have lives outside of this. So you can talk to them how you would talk to them normally. Like as long as the KPIs are being met and you're saying what you need to say, then take that for what it is.
I think that's so key, and just about being yourself in any environment. And the thing is, especially like when you're coming into the world of strategy and you really just want to get in and get on the cool brands and have a good team, I think that's a piece that we don't talk about often enough because like people are saying they're having a hard time building strategies or communicating their thoughts, etc. But like to your point about not being able to be yourself, if you're not able to be yourself, maybe you're in the wrong environment.
You're in the wrong environment.
Maybe you're in the wrong culture.
Yeah.
Like maybe you need to move in order to grow, in order to get the skill set that you need or want.
Yeah.
So agree with that completely.
And I think too, like, the fact that people feel like they aren't able to be themselves, I feel like they have to attach to a certain discipline. Like, I only want to be in sports because I like sports. It's a passion point. I only want to be in gaming because I like gaming. It's a gaming, it's a passion point. But it's easy to attach that with being yourself, and that doesn't mean what it is. Like, if you are truly showing up as you will want to, as comfortable as you want to show up, because I don't believe in that bring your whole self to work stuff. But if it's as comfortable as you want to be to, be able to express yourself, like, if you are really living and breathing that, you can do anything. You can do any category. But I think when you are being stifled by this ideology of I can't be myself, but I can tell you what I know about gaming, and I can tell you what I know about fashion. It makes it easier for you to translate that. But it also stifles you because it's like that's your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And how comfortable is it when you aren't being yourself even in that comfort zone? So,
Yep, I agree completely. You've laid so many tips, so many actionable gems that people can actually take away from this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to ask you one more question and then we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
So in the film that you were a part of with Creed and Obsidianworks, there are multiple different people across different disciplines explaining what never stop, never settle means to them. So that's my question to you. What does never stop, never settle mean to you, and what does it look like in your life?
Oh, that's a good one. I wasn't ready for that. Oh my gosh. For me, and I think this is what I'm going to say, go back to that dig deeper, because I think never stop, never settle at its core is very clear. This, it's not really too much room for interpretation if you don't allow it to be too much room for interpretation. Yeah. But I think one way that I've embodied that kind of in a way that is similar but different, my mama, she's always told me the worst thing anybody could ever tell you is no. So ask. Go ahead and do something. Go ahead and see what you can do. Try to put your best foot out there. And if they say no, okay, somebody else will say yes. And so really just making sure that you bring that forward in the way that you approach work, the way that you approach the exposure that you get, the way that you approach opportunities, I think is just really, really, really important. Because when you feel as if you are hitting a wall or you're hitting a ceiling, like you said, I think you just aren't in the right environment. You might need to figure out and think about what that looks like outside of what your comfort zone is or outside of what your norm is. But I feel like I answered the question.
Facts. You did it. Thank you so much.
But no, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing.
And that's it. That's the end of today's episode. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.